Food Security and Agriculture, and Namal Rajapaksa, Member of Parliament from Sri Lanka. The indefatigable tennis legend Vijay Amritraj, Bollywood stars Sunny Deol and Kajol. We also had the privilege of hearing from thought leaders, global CEOs, technology leaders, sports administrators, and top policy makers. We heard them give their insights on the emerging geopolitical calculus, about India's imminent rise as an economic superpower, about the globalization of sport, about what sport teaches us about leadership, about India's energy security, about the challenges and headwinds that businesses could run into in the rebound process, and about India's great infrastructure reset. This was all done yesterday. Today promises to be just as exciting, with a power-packed lineup of thought leaders, government leaders, policy makers, and technology pioneers who will share their vision of the future for us. We'll have the honor of hosting Dr. S. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister of India, Shri Piyush Goyal, Minister of Commerce and Industry, Shri Ashwini Vaishnav, Minister of Railways, Communications and Electronics and Information Technology, and Shri Amit Shah, the Union Home Minister of India. These are among the many other distinguished speakers that we'll hear from today. So let's dive into another day of stimulating discussions, debates, and insights. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and energized. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to express our appreciation and gratitude for our esteemed partners who've made the Rising Bharat Summit possible. Our co-powering partner, Dream Sports, our associate partner, Max Estates, our esteemed partners, Vikram Solar, Samtel Avionics, and RIL. Your support has been invaluable. We also appreciate the contributions of our workspace partner, IndyCube, our exchange partner, National Stock Exchange, our logistics partner, DTDC, and our energy partner, Crown LNG, our insurance partner, Insurance Dekho, and our state partners, Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. Your collaboration and cooperation is crucial for the success of this event. May I now invite my colleague, Toya Singh, to take us through this morning's power-packed sessions.
Thank you, Palki. Distinguished guests, thank you for joining us today. Let's start today's proceedings by diving straight into all of the intricacies of India's rising global influence, and we have the perfect person to guide us through this next conversation. As we all know, India's been making waves on the global stage, right from successfully hosting the G20 and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summits, to being an integral part of strategic groups like the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue and BRICS. Our Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, has been instrumental to showcasing India's communities to the global stage, emphasizing the concept of Vasudev Kutumbakam. The world is one family. Let's hear now from the man who's been right at the forefront of shaping India's foreign policy, bringing in a new era of confidence and self-assurance. Right from navigating the complexities of the Russia-Ukraine war to addressing the conflicts in West Asia and, of course, the ever-evolving dynamics with China, he's been right at the front of India's foreign policy. Please join us in welcoming to the stage Dr. S. Jaishankar, the Minister of External Affairs, for a session titled New World Order, India at the Global High Table. He's going to be in conversation with Zaka Jacob. This is going to be a fascinating conversation, ladies and gentlemen.
moment from an Indian perspective.
Sure.
Okay? What are, since, let us say, since the beginning of reform, 1990s, in 30 years, what are your FTA agreements? They're largely to the economies east of India, okay, with the ASEAN, with ASEAN members, with Japan, with Korea, Australia, which is not the same. Now, where are actually your many of these are competitive economies.
Yeah.
Okay? In fact, with most of these countries, we are running today trade deficits. Now, where is the natural growth potential for our exports? It's to the countries west of us. You know, it's in the Gulf, it's in Europe, it's in the UK, it's in the United States, possibly in Latin America. And actually, those are the agreements which have lagged behind. So it's been our endeavor, I can tell you. I mean, from 2014, for example, we've been pressing the Europeans saying, look, can we re-engage, because we had stopped engaging. Then after Brexit, we responded very quickly to the UK's interest in reaching an agreement. And, you know, we see an opportunity, I mean, in the current situation vis-a-vis the United States. These are, to me, really the priorities which we should be doing. We should be doing it in our own interest, not because some other president of another country says, he's created a situation.
I want to talk a little bit about Europe, because you had sort of become a bit of a lightning rod for them about talking about oil imports from Russia, saying how can you import from a country that's gone into war and invaded and so on. And you've laid out very articulately for India and for the rest of the world what India's position is. Now the same Europeans are scampering for an FTA with India. You know, do you see a double standard there, or?
No. I think you're being unfair to Europe. Yes, you're being unfair to Europe. I think the Europeans were serious about an FTA earlier. It's just we haven't seen that kind of urgency. You know, maybe their way of working is different. So I can't expect everybody to be the same. So they take, typically they have taken much longer periods between interacting with each other. My point is that, Europe today, I think, realizes the importance of deeper ties with India and the relevance of the FTA for that purpose. We had in the end of February 21 European commissioners led by President von der Leyen visiting India. Very unique happening. Not just for India, even for them. They don't normally do that. I think there's a very serious message coming out of Europe saying we want to move forward on this. We welcome it, we reciprocate it, and I'm pretty confident that just as we are seeing a very intense engagement with the United States, and by the way with the UK as well, I expect the pace to pick up with Europe. We have an aspirational goal. We'd like to close out the FTA this year. But, when we get there, we'll see.
I want to talk about the neighborhood. Last time you were here at the summit, the big concern, the big talking point was the relationship with China, and you had said that the relationship is not normal. And, we need to deal with the situation at the border for the relationship to become normal. Now, there's been a disengagement process. The Prime Minister has met with the Chinese President. You've met with your counterpart, I think, on a couple of occasions since then. How would you describe the state of the relationship with China? How far away from normal is it?
Well, it's obviously better than the last time I was here. Sure. I think the disengagement, particularly the Depsang-Temchok, was important. We are now addressing, to some extent, issues on the border because there's been a force build-up over a period of years. But there were many other things which also happened during this period. Some of it was a collateral of the situation. Some of it was actually a carryover from the COVID era. For example, our flights, direct flights stopped during COVID. They were not resumed. the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra stopped during COVID. It did not again resume. So I think there is work to be done. We are at it. We are, sort of trying to see whether a lot of this post-COVID and, parallel to the border tension, the combination of these issues, how much we can progress on this. We are looking at it because at the end of the day, we have always maintained that the situation which we saw between 2020 and 2024 was not in the interest of either country. It was not in the interest of our relationship. And I think there is a recognition of that now.
So it's on the road to being normal again?
Well, I think we are moving in a positive direction. The problem with your profession is you want instantaneous transformation. The challenge of my profession is it's a very arduous and painstaking one.
I'm glad that we are sticking to each other's respective professions, but because there's so much talk around trade and because President Trump has made that the point of conversation, you referred to, we have trade imbalances with a lot of countries to the east, right? Is this, you reckon, an opportunity, again, academically speaking, an opportunity for India to look at some of those trade relationships and say that, these imbalances cannot sustain, just like America is saying that, an imbalanced trade relationship is not working for them?
Well, we've had concerns. We have articulated those concerns. This is not my direct remit, but I have a visibility into it, and we work as a team within the government. I think one of the issues for us, for example, has been the review of the ASEAN-India Trade in Goods Agreement, ITIGA, which we believe has been unnecessarily prolonged. I think it's important for all countries today to realize that the nature of the global discourse on trade is changing. There are new parameters, there are new metrics of judgment. I think countries will do what they need to do to protect their businesses, to protect their labor, to protect their societies. We cannot be an exception to it. So I think we have concerns with many of the countries east of us, countries with whom we have FTA arrangements and also countries with whom we don't.
Prime Minister was recently at the BIMSTEC summit. You were there with him. It's the first time that he met with the new interim leader of Bangladesh, Professor Yunus. There's been a lot of concerns here in India about some of the statements that have been made by the leadership there, some of the goings-on the ground, whether it's attacks on minorities, so on and so forth. From within whatever you can divulge in the public domain, what did the Prime Minister tell Professor Yunus, particularly on this comment about India's northeast being landlocked and, Bangladesh being the gateway to the ocean, and also on the attacks on minorities, on both those issues?
No, look, I think the main messages from our side, which came out at the meeting, one, that our relationship with Bangladesh, for historical reasons, is a very unique relationship. It's a very fundamentally a people-to-people connect. Much more so, perhaps, than any other relationship than I can think of. And that's something we need to recognize. So, it's not necessarily one of the government of the day. Secondly, we have concerns. We have concerns about the rhetoric which is coming out of people in Bangladesh. We have concerns about radicalizing tendencies we see. We have concerns about the attacks on minorities. And I think we were very, open about sharing those concerns. Again, as a country which, no country wishes Bangladesh well more than us. That's in our, I would say almost in our DNA, if you can say that. And as a well-wisher, as a friend, I think we hope that, they make go the right way and do the right things. And as a country with a, which has a democratic tradition, democracies require elections. That's how mandates are given and mandates are renewed. So, we hope that they go down.
The Tahur Rana, who's the convict in the 26/11 attacks, is likely to be extradited perhaps in the next 24 to 48 hours. So I want your comment on that. And second, this whole thing, Balochistan seems to be in a bit of a flux, and Pakistan has resorted to its old, copybook that, oh, India is doing this, so on and so forth. So on both those issues, I would like your
No, there's nothing really new that I can say on the Tahur Rana issue. I mean, obviously, we welcome the decision of the American legal process. On the Balochistan issue, look, I don't want to say anything. I mean, there is clearly a very disturbed situation there. People are suffering there. And if I say something, there'll be finger pointing. So I don't want to say it.
But just on the principle that, every time India says there is terrorism emanating from Pakistan targeting India, you're met with a stone wall.
Look, Zaka, I don't have to say it. It's visible. Even they say it. But it's not like I'm making an accusation and everybody in Pakistan is there saying, no, this is completely untrue. You have people in Pakistan who openly declare that they are doing terrorist activities in India. So this is not an argument. I mean, this is not a hypothesis. This is something they proudly claim. So I think, we've always maintained, not just us, I mean, all sensible people have maintained that if you start a terrorism industry, you will be consumed by it, and that is exactly what we are seeing today in Pakistan.
So at a time when, there's an acceleration for regional partnerships and so on, you don't see any future for SAARC, given if Pakistan does not change its tack and does not use or employ terror as an instrument of state policy?
Well, let me pose that question to you. I mean, would you be okay if we were nice to each other in the morning and I come and attack your house at night?
Certainly not.
I mean, would you live with it?
Certainly not.
Then why would you even ask me that question?
No, just in the context of SAARC. Let me also come to last few questions. The relationship with Canada. We've had a pretty, certain issues that plague the relationship in the last couple of years. There's going to be an election there soon in the next few weeks. Are you considering reinstating the Indian High Commissioner in Ottawa? Is there anything moving in that direction post the election?
Look, again, I'm very cautious in anything I would say publicly about Canada. They're heading for elections. I don't want a remark become an issue out there in their politics. For us, the direction in which ties have gone is something which, again, we believe has not served the interests of Canada. The kind of latitude that was given to people espousing extremism, secessionism, violence, if you import such people and encourage such people, it's going to have consequences in your own landscape. And, what we were saying, in a way, the cautions we were uttering inside the room, unfortunately played out outside the room as well. So we would like certainly to see, after all, it's a big country, Commonwealth country with whom we've had, generally good relations. Yes, things, again, for almost exactly the same reasons had happened in the 80s. So to the extent that, we see them recognizing the problem and, not giving that kind of political space to such forces, if we would then naturally take that into account. I mean, I have no gain by having bad relations with Canada. I would like them, actually, I would like both sides to mend the relationship. But I would also like people to recognize that there's a real problem out there. And the problem is, the kind of space given to these forces.
One final question. We're anticipating President Putin of Russia to visit India at some point this year. In this new emerging global order where, President Trump wants to end the war, he's talking directly to both Russia and Ukraine, how does India figure in this emerging matrix? Because India is one of the few countries, yesterday the Prime Minister was here, India is one of the few countries that can speak to both Russia and Ukraine and has good relations with both.
You know, we've had a very, I would say, both a sensible position, full position. Sensible in terms of very early on, we took the view publicly that this conflict cannot be resolved on the battlefield, that it was necessary for a return to dialogue and diplomacy, that it was important for the parties concerned to talk to each other, you know, because that was not happening. And there was actually a view at that time that everybody else will gather together and somehow produce a solution, and the other party, in this case Russia, would be confronted with that as a choice. Now, much of what we held in 2022, 23, 24 has actually come to pass. And you know, there's no vindication in it. I mean, in fact, if anything, there is regret that, you know, so many lives have been lost, so much time has gone, so much damage has been done, not only to the countries, but to the global society and to the international economy. But, okay, now there is a greater understanding that we need, appreciation that we need to actually, they need to engage each other. So, to the extent we can sort of motivate that, foster that, encourage that, we would do that. And you know, again, I maintain that we've always, you know, what we said in Moscow was not different than what we said in Kiev and what we said in third places. And we've tried to, you know, have conversations here, take those there with the approval of each party. And so that's one part of what we've tried to do. The other is, you know, there have been different dimensions of this conflict which have popped up from time to time. Different countries have weighed in, and I think it's such a really serious issue. It's natural, it's not a single or a small number of countries. We approve of all of that. I think anything which any country can do or any group of countries can do to help, we welcome that. We've tried to do a few things ourselves. We weighed in with other people, you know. It could be some of the nuclear-related issues, or it could be grain corridor, or whatever it is. But the objective is to help. The objective is not to put yourself ahead. I mean, we're not, you know, actively searching for a role. But if, you know, either of the parties or any other country comes and says, look, can you help out on this? We'd be open to doing it.
All right, and I'll wrap up. I know you like cricket a lot, so these 2,140 days as the longest serving foreign minister post-Nehru, you look at it as a test match, as a T20, as a one-dayer, or this is your career with an asterisk, not out. S. Jaishankar batting at 2-1-4-0, not out.
No, I think on this one, look, it's been, again, it's been a very interesting heading to 6 years as foreign minister, but I treat it to some degree as a continuum of what I was doing earlier. In a way, I think the next few years will be extraordinarily challenging. It'll be challenging for the world. It'll be challenging for us as a country, precisely because we have to keep rising through all this clutter, through all these tensions. And to be associated with that process, to be given responsibility of that process, I think is a great honor, it's a great responsibility, and I'm very, very, you know, grateful for it.
We have the best batsman batting at not out on that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. S. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister of India.
Thank you, Dr. S. Jaishankar, for sharing your deep insights on the granularities of global security, strategic affairs, diplomacy, and of course, trade at this moment. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on now. As we gather here today, we are reminded of the significance of justice in our society. The judiciary plays a vital role in upholding the Constitution, protecting individual rights, and promoting social justice for each individual. Who better to talk about any of this than Justice Dhananjay Y. Chandrachud? His remarkable tenure as the 50th Chief Justice of India has left an indelible mark on the country's judicial landscape. Through his illustrious career, Justice Chandrachud actually demonstrated a steadfast commitment to the principles of justice, equality, and human rights. His landmark judgments have shaped the country's legal framework as it looks today. And as we engage in the next few minutes, in this fireside chat that you're going to see play out in front of you, we will delve into the complexities of India's justice system. We'll explore ways in which to achieve speedy, fair justice for each citizen in our country, and we'll discuss the challenges that are faced by the judiciary today. So the role of technology, for example, in enhancing access to justice, and the importance today of justice and judicial accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few seconds, welcome to the stage Justice Dhananjay Y. Chandrachud, the former Chief Justice of India, for a session titled Law, Law, Land, Seeking Speedy and Fair Justice. He's going to be in conversation with Zaka Jacob.
So Justice Chandrachud, one of the longest serving Chief Justices of India, thank you very much and welcome to Rising Bharat. My colleague Ananya is with me and will be asking you a few questions. Let's start with the theme of Rising Bharat this year, which is Youthful Aspirations. There's a crowd of young people here. What would you tell young people who want to get into your profession particularly, at a time when, let's face it, there's a challenge of technology in your profession, there is entry barriers, all kinds of things. People are saying lawyers won't be required anymore. What would you say to young people who want to make law their profession?
The most important thing about the law is that it signifies a commitment to public service. Because the law is all about societal service. Of course, lawyers do service to themselves as well when they earn fees from their clients, but that's a small part of the story. The essence of law is realizing rights, and in the process of realizing the rights of others, to bring about a wider social transformation. So in that sense, I would encourage young people to join the law. It's a profession which is breaking glass ceilings, it's breaking feudal barriers, it's breaking patriarchal barriers. You asked me about, AI, and will AI take the place of lawyers or possibly judges? Well, there's lots that AI can do, as we will possibly discuss, but there's one thing which AI cannot substitute, and that's compassion, a sense of love, a sense of respect, a sense of dignity, and that only humans can bring to the process.
But the profession still has a lot of entry barriers, right? I mean, you talked about feudal barriers, gender barriers. How do you make the profession a lot more egalitarian, if you will, for people who are wanting to enter it and make a career out of it, particularly in the context of women? Again, it's something that you've taken a great interest in when you were a judge and then later on CJI. Do you think this is a level playing field?
Well, there are two segments of the profession that we must deal with. One, which is purely in the private realm, which is unregulated, namely lawyers entering into courts. And then you have the more structured part of the legal profession, where young lawyers join the judiciary right at the inception. And there you find that because the process of recruitment to the Indian judiciary at the lowest levels is structured. It's based on competitive examinations, on interviews, where there's a level playing field, particularly for women, you'd find that that's the place where the social barriers are being broken down. Because a young person across the realm, irrespective of their command over English, because as you know, the local language, the regional language is the language of the courts. These young people are now entering into the legal profession. They're all first generation judges. So quite contrary to what is portrayed very often in the media, these are people without any background who aspire for nothing but the best. The second thing that is happening is that so many young women are entering into the Indian judiciary at the lowest levels. You asked me about women, and should we deal with that briefly right now itself? I mean, I'll leave it to you, because there's something very important that, we need to focus on about women. The issue about creating a level playing field for women is not just an issue of the legal profession. It's an issue which has a broader social content. Take a very simple case where both spouses work and you have a child. There's a parents-teachers meeting in this class. Who goes to those parent-teachers meetings? The mother? If the child falls sick, is down with measles for 2 weeks, who stays home? The mother? Who stays home when the woman is expecting a child and she's in an advanced stage of pregnancy? Obviously the person who's carrying the child. Now what happens as a result of these societal inhibitions and barriers, the woman also has a very disproportionate responsibility for looking after the elderly in the family, parents, in-laws, the aged in the family. So if a woman drops out of the workforce at an early stage, it becomes extremely difficult to get back. Now take the case of the Indian judiciary. If a woman has, say, had a break for 3 years or 5 years when the children were young, it becomes extremely difficult then to get back at the same level as a male counterpart would be at. For the reason when we are recruiting judges to the High Court, we look at how many judgments do you have? What's the volume of cases that you have dealt with? A woman who has faced this break in career is basically not able to compete at the same level. So first and foremost, we will have to therefore lower, in a certain respect, the entry barriers or the entry standards to have more women entering into the higher judiciary, which is not to say that you are lowering quality, but you are lowering these barriers, conscious of the fact that women face these disproportionate social burdens which men do not necessarily face. But as I said, Zaka, this is not really so much an issue of the legal profession as a broader social issue. In the legal profession, there are certain peculiar things which women have to combat. One of them, for instance, is that, the high mobility at the workplace. You don't go to one job or one desk and sit there the whole day, right? Going to your office is only a very small part of a woman's or a man's role in the legal profession. You're working in the court all day long, but your work doesn't come to an end after court hours are over. You go back to your office, you're meeting clients, you're traveling cities. So in a sense, these particular constraints of the legal profession have a disproportionate impact on women in our society. And really speaking, therefore, there has to be a broader societal response to ensure that more and more women enter into the workplace. But as I said, India is changing. I mean, you just look at the audience in a court and you will find an overwhelmingly large number of young women today in our courtrooms, which is just a sign of the changing times.
But at the same point, while we have a lot of women entering into this profession, but at the same point of time, they exit too soon as well. So because, we have seen how delicate the washrooms in the trial courts would be, that they're into very bad shape, they cannot go. And there are a lot of infrastructural issues also. Do you think that if they are addressed or some other things are adjusted, there could be better workplace management for women, and there might be a chance that more and more women could actually stay in the profession for a longer time itself?
Well, of course, I completely agree with you. For instance, in the district judiciary, we have very standard and well-established rules which allow for maternity leave, for leave at different stages of a woman's career when a child is, say, for instance, appearing for a 10th board examination or a 12th board examination. So where you have structured rules which provide for a level playing field for women, women are able to really respond to the challenges of the profession. The problem arises in the unstructured market-based system, which is the private space in the legal profession, where you have individual lawyers recruiting juniors. There's no overall structure in the sense that there is no overall regulation on how you will treat women in the workplace, because you don't have one large corporate entity like a big law firm only employing women. So where you find that, the interface of women in the legal profession is with a structural organization like the judiciary or law firms, there you would find that more and more women are extremely, successful. On the other hand, when it comes to solo practitioners, how much will you pay? Will you stop paying a woman because she's on leave for 3 months in your chamber? She's gone on leave for 3 months because a parent is seriously unwell. A woman has gone on leave for 3 months because she has a child coming up to deliver. How do we ensure that, you have a more socially responsible and socially responsive legal profession? And that's therefore something which the law can do only to a certain extent. The law is not an answer to everything. The change has to come through and it has to take place within society.
Chief Justice, there's a lot of talk around judicial reform of late, and I know we don't want to get into the specifics of anything because, some things could be still under investigation, some matters could be sub judice. I just want your 35,000 feet view on judicial reform. Is it a good time to have this debate in this country? You were part of, various judgments which talked about judicial reform. There is a view that, something needs to be done. I want your 35,000 feet view on whether it is an apt time to have that debate in this country about whether some certain things need to be reformed in the higher judiciary.
35,000 feet above sea level, when you have an air pocket, the pilot tells the passengers to fasten their seat belts and navigates that air pocket. Now, there is something to learn from that, and that's something which I have learned over, years of being in the judiciary and before that as a lawyer, which is never take decisions which are reactionary. When you have a problem on hand, deal with that problem on hand. Allow the dust to settle. Have a broad stakeholder consultation, a broad reflection on what needs to be done, and then take decisions which will be in the interests of the institution and the nation. Never take decisions on the spot because you may be reacting to a situation and your decision would be a decision which may not be well thought of. Talking of judicial reform, I think reform has to begin at the very base of the pyramid, namely the district judiciary, because that's where common people come into contact with the judicial system. A young couple which has a matrimonial dispute, where do they go to? They don't go to the High Court or the Supreme Court as a matter of first instance. They go to the family court. Now you see that in the family courts, there's a huge backlog of cases for the reason that we have used the adversarial system for resolving family disputes, which is so completely incorrect. Family disputes have to be resolved by applying non-adversarial systems because you have a child. If the couple has a child, there are issues of child custody, of child welfare. So we have to adopt a more non-adversarial system at the level of the district judiciary. The second important reform which we need to focus on is the huge vacancies in the district judiciary. Recruitment to the Indian district judiciary takes place in the states. It's never at the national level. I am a proponent of at least some national deliberation taking place on should we have an all-India judicial service in India. In other words, we must make some effort to attract the best into the Indian judiciary at the district judiciary level. Apply reservations. Now, the states do have some concerns because we are a federal nation. So will having an all-India judicial service impact on the responsibilities, the authorities, the constitutional role of the states? That has to be obviously thought of, and I don't discount the concerns of the states. But having said that, we can at least have a national level examination and then allow for recruitment by the states on the basis of the merit list in the national examination, applying reservations in relation to each state, whether for the SCs, the STs, or the OBCs, as the case may be. So that reform has to take place at the lowest level. Just one final word on this question, which is that the government, the state, is the largest litigator in Indian courts. The largest volume of litigation into Indian courts comes from the government. Now, I think the government has to rethink its policy on litigation and reduce the amount of litigation which governmental agencies take resort to. If that is done, you will find that more and more efficient means of resolving disputes take place. Unfortunately, we live in a culture of distrust where, the ordinary feeling is of every officer, say at the middle level or a senior level in government, go to court. If the court tells us to do it, well, we are protected because the court decided in a particular way. I think we have to answer that and allow for less and less disputes to go to litigation and allow for less and less disputes to go to trial. I saw, for instance, in the Supreme Court that every case goes to an oral hearing. Even a case where, say, 3 courts are in agreement with each other. We are probably one of the few Supreme Courts in the world where oral arguments are the predominant method of resolving disputes. Should we have reliance on oral arguments to that extent? Because they place a burden on the productive time of the courts. Then which are those cases where you should have oral arguments? Which are those cases where you should not have oral arguments? Some serious conversations across the nation on these aspects is necessary because we now have gathered experience over 75 years of the functioning of the judiciary. And there has to be a broader national dialogue on these critical issues which face the Indian judiciary to make it a more efficient judiciary, because unless we do so, the judiciary will not really in that sense be able to be a critical component in the advancement and the development of the nation. The judiciary is a very key aspect of rule of law. So when you speak, for instance, of getting more business into India, investment into India, what does investment need? What does global investment need or domestic investment need? Global or domestic investment needs a climate where the law is certain, the law is objective, the law is applied in a transparent manner, and disputes can be resolved efficiently. So, reforming the judicial system in that sense is going to be a key element in the overall progress of the nation to being truly a developed nation, both economically and socially.
Judiciary often walks down the tightrope between activism and restraint. So how do you feel? You've been the Chief Justice, you've been a judge of the Supreme Court for, years long. How do you feel that delicate balance can actually be maintained, or things do not go either this way or that way?
I don't think that the dichotomy or the conflict is between judicial activism and judicial restraint. The choice is between judicial responsibility or judicial abdication. Take a very simple case like COVID vaccinations. The government initially was not a proponent of the policy that vaccinations should be supplied free of charge to all Indians. Now, the case came up before the Supreme Court of India. We were in a lockdown. We were all doing the case through a video conferencing platform situated within our own homes. And we asked some critical questions to the government. We said, is it not your duty to ensure that public health is prioritized over everything else at this particular point of time? Now, at a certain level, whether vaccination should be distributed free of charge or on a paid basis, it's a question of policy, right? But is it a question of policy when you are dealing with the right to life of our citizens? And the answer would be no. So it ultimately you're looking at the perspective of the problem. And I gave you this particular case because I believe the Supreme Court had a very important role in getting the government to agree to a policy where free vaccinations would be distributed across the nation. And as we know, we were a success story, not just domestically, but across the world where, our vaccinations reached out to different parts of the globe, including nations which are not developed nations or which lacked resources, where we provided vaccinations to them. So courts, coming back to your question, apply standards which are laid down in the law. They apply standards which are laid down by the Constitution. Take a case of the environment and development. To what extent should you protect the environment? To what extent do you allow for development by, say, setting up a greenfield airport or highways in hilly areas, which are necessary for national security? So courts constantly are applying legal standards. And therefore to say that, courts are activist is, I think, not a very correct appreciation of the way work takes place in the courts. The courts have a responsibility under the Constitution. If they were not to fulfill that responsibility, it would amount to abdication. And therefore I said the question is of responsibility versus abdication and not really activism versus restraint.
So I just wanted to follow up on that. You say that the choice between activism versus restraint is a false one. It's more responsibility versus abdication. There's also the balance that needs to be found between judicial, the right to fair reputation of a judge versus the right to transparency of the public to know what the judge holds, right? There is now a new move that your successor has made that all judges have to declare their assets. I know it started under you, and the last time we met, I think you said 30 out of 35 judges have already declared their assets and put it on the website. Now he's made it mandatory for everyone. Do you feel there is a need in this country to restore full faith in the judiciary when it comes to the question of assets, when it comes to the debate that we're having about judicial reform, etc.? And how do you speak to that need?
It's important to understand that right from, I believe, 2009, there was a resolution of the full court of the Supreme Court that all judges must declare their assets. Now, as you know, all of us as citizens have to declare our assets for the purposes of income tax. And all judges are like individual citizens. Income tax pays. So when you file your returns, you necessarily have to disclose your assets, which are dealt with, in certain cases audited. Now, the resolution which was passed by the Supreme Court of India was that declaration of assets by all judges, including the Chief Justice of India, is mandatory. Whether they should be put on the website should be left to each individual judge. Because there is more to be said on both sides of the picture. Should you have judges' assets declared on a website so that just anybody can scrutinize what kind of assets which you have? Or should this be subject to some level of responsible institutional mechanisms? What is the purpose of declaring your assets? To identify whether a judge has recorded a sudden spurt in the assets during the course of the judicial career. Now, does putting that on the website necessarily pursue the aim of transparency? Or does it only give an opportunity to social media to pick up a judge and target a judge, not knowing where those assets came from? You have judges, for instance, let me share with you. You have judges who have come to the Supreme Court from the district judiciary who have been salaried employees from the first day of their joining the judiciary. On the other hand, you have lawyers who have been extremely successful, lawyers who have been recruited directly from the Supreme Court, bar, to become judges of the Supreme Court. Their asset base would be very different. Then you have people like me, who were lawyers for a while. I practiced for 20 years and then became a judge of the High Court in 2000. So there is a broad diversity within the Indian judiciary itself, in the higher judiciary. So far as the district judiciary is concerned, again, there are very stringent rules which apply across the states, which requires for a disclosure of assets. So yes, I completely understand and I support the decision which has been taken. I support the decision which was taken by my predecessors a decade ago on the declaration of assets. To what extent should you have transparency? That's a very important question, and that's a more vexed question. We shouldn't, in the name of transparency, be doing something which will prevent genuinely competent people from entering into the institution of the judiciary. And that's the one danger which we have to balance out.
You know, while we speak of institutional transparency, we are in a stage of live streaming where we have regional judgments now coming in. What more steps do you feel that, can come in as far as institutional transparency, either of the Supreme Court or the district judiciary is concerned, so that everybody can actually access the law, everybody can know how court proceedings go on? Because already we have steps. You had initiated, live streaming. You had a robust system of live streaming, simplified judgment, region. What more can be put in as far as, increasing this institutional transparency is concerned?
Let us begin with legislation, the process of forming laws. Now, a very welcome step which was taken by Parliament and therefore by the government while it moved the Finance Bill of 2025 was to simplify the Income Tax Act. And just to give the viewers some figures, there were 47 chapters in the Income Tax Act which have been brought down to 23. There were 819 sections which have been brought down to 536. There were 5.12 lakh words in the Income Tax Act which have been brought down to 2.60 lakh words. There were 1,200 provisos, the provisos in legislation, provided that, and provided further that. So these 1,200 provisos have been removed. There were 900 explanations which have been removed. So the first step, I think, and I'm not being critical, it's just a process of evolution. It's important that we simplify laws. Say a law meant for maintenance of senior citizens. The senior citizen must be able to understand the law. A law meant to protect women against domestic violence. That law must be understood by those women who are going to seek access to justice. The law is not meant for judges and lawyers alone, right? It's meant for citizens. One problem which you perceive in the law, and I'm sure so many of the audience would also agree with me, is that there is a disconnect between the spoken version of our regional languages and the official version of our regional languages. For instance, my mother tongue is Marathi, but I'm very fluent in Hindi and I know several other Indian languages. Now, spoken Marathi at home or spoken Hindi is very different from official Marathi or official Hindi. Now, how does a citizen understand official Marathi or official Hindi, or that for that matter, official Tamil or Malayalam or Telugu or Bangla or Gujarati or Punjabi? So we have to bridge this gap between the way laws are drafted in the official text and the laws as they should be understood in the language which citizens speak. So the first step is, of course, the Saral movement. Make laws more Saral, make them more simplified. The second, insofar as what the judiciary should do. Now, I must share with you one of our initiatives when I was Chief Justice of India. We began a monthly newsletter through the Center for Research and Planning, and every judgment which was delivered by the Supreme Court, the judgment may be 50 pages, it may be 500 pages. We would put into a small paragraph, in very simple terms, what that judgment decides, so that the common citizen must know what is it that this judgment has done for me. That is something which we have done. Almost all the important judgments from independence, we tried to pick up the most important among them, simplify them, and to put them on the website of the Supreme Court. for allowing for citizens to understand what the content of the judgment is. And the third and final thing, which is that the language of judgments has to also be simplified. You know, legal language is extremely complex. It's all jargon. There's so much of Latin, audi alterum partem, or, nemo judex in sua causa. Good heavens. Citizens are not concerned with, Latin of some bygone age. Or you have words like thereunder and whereunder and heretofore and hereinafter. Stop using these kind of words. I think we need to simplify the way we write, because who do we write for? You write for citizens. And therefore, language has to be a lot more simple. It's extremely difficult to be simple. It's very easy to be complex. That's one thing that we need to do. Final thing, live streaming. Live streaming, I think, has been a very critical part of our outreach to citizens. Live streaming of court proceedings has taken the work of particularly the Supreme Court and the High Courts to the homes of Indian citizens. It's also, democratized access to justice. A citizen across India, a citizen sitting in Meghalaya, can appear and watch proceedings before the Supreme Court. When we had the Lok Adalat, we had citizens all over India watching what we were doing in the Lok Adalat. So it sort of allows for citizens to participate in the work of the courts.
I do want to ask you, the Supreme Court recently delivered a judgment, upholding the right to freedom of expression, particularly in the context of comedians and poetry and satire and so on. So you have that on the one hand, and then you have, and earlier on in one of the answers you talked about how judges are at the receiving end of social media criticism, right? And you have been a victim of that as well. One day you're celebrated as a poster boy of liberalism, the other day you're criticized because somebody didn't like a judgment that you wrote. How does one balance the two? The larger debate about freedom of expression and, should it be absolute or not? And two, what do judges do when you're this is the day and age that you live in. You are, whether you like it or not, subject to social media scrutiny. There are things you cannot say, but, your image gets tarnished. So how does one draw the balance?
Speaking for myself, free speech and a marketplace of ideas is critical to Indian democracy. And that's why the framers of our Constitution incorporated Article 19(1)(a) into the Constitution. Freedom of speech and expression is non-negotiable. And that's why we are here today on this platform, because our society, our Constitution allows for this discourse. Now, when you have discourse, that discourse is not going to be as civilized as, say, the discourse in a rational forum. Sometimes the discourse can be very pungent. But my own take is that so be it. Let people decide. If you don't like a movie, don't watch it. You don't like a book, don't read it. Nobody compels you to watch a movie. Nobody compels you to read the book. The danger arises when you have prior censorship. And that is the danger to the freedom of speech and expression, which you had, for instance, in the emergency. But having said that, we have robust law. We have robust law in India which deals with issues such as obscenity, defamation, causing hatred between religious groups or religious communities. And our laws, I believe, are robust. Now, the process of creating the infrastructure for implementing the laws is a different thing. And that needs to be strengthened to make these laws more effective. You have cases of excess. Some of them we have been seeing in the recent past. But then how do you deal with, say, someone who abuses the right to free speech? I think that is more vexed. And my take is that allow the existing law to deal with these cases if there's a breach of law. Let's not get unduly sensitive about someone who says something which is perhaps not appropriate. And speaking for judges, what should they do for all the criticism which they have to encounter? Should I tell you my genuine answer?
Yes, please.
The answer is perhaps a little it's symbolic. Judges just need to use the gym more often and to have a better workout. Why? You must have robust shoulders.
Ladies and gentlemen, former Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us on Rising Bharat. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Chandrachud. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on. India has undergone in the last few years a remarkable transformation. Driven by rising disposable incomes, growing urbanization, and soaring aspirations among our billions. Yesterday's luxuries have become today's necessities. And mobile phones have actually become an indispensable part of our day-to-day. With over 750 million smartphone users and counting, India has become a mobile-first nation. Now, the numbers we just shared with you are staggering. There's also low data costs, high content consumption, and growing internet penetration across the country that have made India a magnet for mobile content creation, content consumption, and of course, AI, artificial intelligence. So, what does any of this mean for the future of mobile technology, for the future of content consumption, and for the creator economy in India? That's the question we're going to be taking a look at. And how are companies and founders adapting to this new landscape? What innovations, what exciting new startups will we see out of India in the next few years? To answer all of these questions, we have the pleasure of hosting, in just a few seconds from now, Arkis Evangelidis. He's the co-founder and India president of Nothing. It's a mobile and tech company. We're also going to have with us on stage Siddharth Srinivasan. He's the head of Go-To-Market India 11 Labs. Let's welcome them to the stage, and in conversation with both of them, this is going to be a fireside chat. To have them in conversation will, of course, be Chandra Srikanth. Do come onto the stage.
Good morning, everyone. A huge round of applause for Nothing and 11 Labs, two of the most exciting consumer tech and AI companies in the world. Thank you very much, Arkis, for flying down all the way from London for our Rising Bharat Summit. Thank you, Siddharth, for flying down to New Delhi. It's a very exciting time in AI. Just a while ago, I was in conversation with Arvind Srinivas of Perplexity, and he said he gets very little sleep these days because when he stops working and he's unwinding, he's still thinking about what is happening because the pace of disruption is just so much. So tell me how you are infusing AI in what you do. So for those who are not aware, Nothing is a smartphone brand. Arkis was with OnePlus before he decided to build this completely new smartphone brand. And India is now the biggest market for Nothing. So that's amazing. And 11 Labs was the AI startup that worked on the Modi-Lex Friedman podcast recently. So, you saw PM Modi talking real time in English, content getting dubbed. That happened due to 11 Labs' AI efforts. So huge round of applause for both of them. Arkis, what's happening in the world of smartphones?
Yeah, I think AI brings quite an exciting opportunity to the table. I think for the longest period ever, there has been this kind of app-led user experience when it comes to our smartphone, and this hasn't really drastically changed in the last 10, 15 years. And on the other hand, our dependency on smartphones has drastically changed. We use smartphones for everything nowadays. And therefore, AI brings a whole new opportunity in terms of redefining that user experience. If you think about the app-led experience, is very siloed in a way, where you need to kind of open different screens, menu, apps to kind of bring content or things you want to do. Whereas AI if applied thoughtfully on top of this experience, you will be able to kind of be a connective tissue between your intent and action, right? Your smartphone understands probably more than yourself, and basically it will help facilitate a user experience that's a lot more intentional, more contextualized, and also a lot more dynamic. Because if you think about the current experience in consumer tech products, those are kind of system forced onto the user. Whereas now we have the opportunity to be building systems that adapt to the users, because the way you would use a smartphone is probably different the way I would use a smartphone or the content I would consume. So that's what we're kind of working on. This will be probably, that shift will be happening in the next probably 10 years and in a gradual way. But at the end of the day, drastically changing the whole smartphone
So
user
will we be
experience.
spending more time on smartphones than ever? I mean, smartphone addiction, screen addiction is already an issue. Is that only going to go up? Will we become slaves of the AI agents operating our smartphones?
If anything, I think our smartphone usage will become a lot more intentional, right? Because now you're using apps or services that have their own agendas, right? Whereas in the future with AI, basically it will be systems that will adapt to your user experience. Even now, social media, for instance, you open your social media, you see everything except content from your maybe best friend, because he's not posting so much, and it doesn't come into the algorithm. But in the future, that content will be from your best friend or family member, will be able to kind of be brought up straight onto your maybe home screen without having to open an app. So you kind of keep in touch with people that you meant to be in touch with when you first started using social media. That's where things are heading. So agendas won't be pushed onto you, but the user experience will be a lot more personalized, a lot more dynamic, and hopefully a lot more intuitive and intentional. So hopefully you'll be spending less time, or at least the time you'll be spending will be a lot more productive on your smartphone.
Right. Siddharth, tell us about this podcast of Modi. How did you do this live AI dubbing? And what was interesting was, typically when we see this happening live, right, someone else is doing the voiceover. But here, it was PM Modi's own voice. So did you train it on his voice? How long did it take? Because it was a 3-hour interview. And I mean, it was like he was talking in his own voice. How did AI do that?
First off, thanks for having me and 11 Labs here at this event. Glad to be here. The Modi and Lex Friedman interview, it was a culmination of a journey for us, right? We're a 2-year-old, little over 2 years AI lab. We build our own audio and models.
Which is already raised 250 million, valued at 3 billion in just 2 years.
Exactly, that's right. So it's been an unbelievable year from January 23, when we put out our first model publicly, to today where, here I am amongst all of you, right? So it's a fantastic journey. Now, we've had a partnership, with Lex for a couple of these already, right? So, we worked on the Javier Milei podcast he did. We worked on the one with Zelensky, and, we got to participate in the opportunity to make the Modi interview a lot more accessible, but also to make Lex Friedman more accessible in India, right? I think if you look at his voice in Hindi, I would say that was pretty spectacular as well, right? Now, that's pretty much what our mission is. We're trying to make content accessible in every voice and every language all around the world. So, when we got this, the team got together, we said, how do we do justice to this? How do we make sure we deliver the best experience so that, in the context of what we just heard from Akis, I think there's the other side, which is also an extension, which is how do you sort of deliver that ultimate personalization? Because finally, content at the end of the day is about connecting at an individual level. We've already seen that journey on the distribution side and content. We've started seeing that to evolving palettes of content consumption when it comes to social media, digital content, and so forth, so on. And now what AI does is it takes that and gives it its next jump, right? And we were able to be a part of that for something as relevant and important as this.
Right. So give us an example. You, me, and Akis are talking right now in English. Suppose we want to do this, want this to be accessed in, say, Hindi and Tamil, in our voices, like in Akis's voice Tamil, in your voice Hindi, my voice both. How long will it take for you?
So the state of the technology is today that later today we could actually have this ready, right? We could...
Why don't you do this for us?
You could do this if you chose. If you want, after this, we could go create a Chandra voice clone And
Okay,
then
that is scary because it can be used in multiple ways.
by you.
Okay.
So I think that's the other part which is important, right? You know, you sort of put the power in the hands of the likeness, IP, voice owner in that sense. So, you know, it's a liberator for you. You have your voice clone, and then you get to choose what the purpose is, and you get to use it in a way which makes sense for you and amplifies everything that you're doing today.
Right. So how do you create those checks? Because what if somebody uses Siddharth's voice clone and starts sending notes to employees of Levin Labs? How do you prevent that? What checks are you putting in place?
So, you know, I think we're in a category where from day one, we realize that responsibility has to be a part of the framework, right, from day one. So we've got our own responsibility framework, which is really around moderation, then, you know, accountability, and then finally provenance. So today what we do is, you know, for example, in the Mr. Modi voice clone example, which we just discussed, you know, the average person can't go up onto 11 Labs platform at least, and then start generating clones and, you know, creating mischief with that, right? We don't allow that, right? So we've got processes where as you sort of do this, first of all, you yourself are in the room and consenting. Number two, every generation is watermarked. And third, you know, if there is a need to sort of track back a piece of content out there and verify, A, was it done in Levin Labs, and B, what was the source of generation, we make that happen the whole way. And so, in fact, that matching, you know, that's a 99% precision plus, right?
How many of you would like to have voice clones, your clones of your own voices? Let's have a show of hands. Okay, how many of you are worried that it will be misused? Still a long way to go to gain trust, I think.
I agree, but you know, if you sort of look at these capabilities, you know, we're in something that is maybe 2.5 years old. If you look at this whole category of generative AI, right? So like these things, I think everything is a story of time. Everything's a story of familiarity and comfort and usage. And everything's also a story of private and public entities sort of working together to evolve sort of the new standards, right? And you already start seeing some standards here in the space like C2PA, for example, you know, digital fingerprinting and so forth, so on. So I think this is a journey that society, private actors, public actors go on together to sort of find that equilibrium which makes sense for people at large.
Right. Akis, as a smartphone maker, what has the last week meant for you? This whole Trump tariffs has roiled public markets. People are too scared to look at their stock market portfolio these days. But as a smartphone manufacturer, you make in India, you make in China. I think in India you have partnerships with Dixon and BYD India. What has this meant for you?
So yeah, as you said, for us, I mean, and especially at our scale, we started now kind of 4 years ago. India is our kind of main market, and we already kind of manufacturing everything here in India. So at this stage, quite limited in a way.
So prices will not be impacted for now?
Limited, yeah. Limited impact.
Right. But we also understand that you're in the process of getting into this big joint venture in India. You're identifying manufacturing partners and, you know, you could be investing a huge amount. So tell us about your manufacturing plans for India. Will we see India becoming a global export hub for nothing going forward?
Yeah, we're very bullish on India, to be honest. You know, when we started this company, the level of excitement and support we're getting out of India was crazy, to be honest. And I think this is due to the fact that India is one of the largest and youngest digital population. I think the level of expertise and knowledge that people have in tech here, like, is way beyond anywhere in the world. You know, the questions we can ask about, like, processor, what type of RAMs, and, you know, users are so knowledgeable. So I think this kind of tech savviness, ever since we started, like, brought in this kind of organic traction as a new entrant in the tech space. And since then, our growth has been tremendous. Last year, we're the fastest growing smartphone brand in India, and I think the future is actually big. You know, I feel that basically, India is at the verge of an entire new revolution when it comes to the smartphone industry. I think India will be quite rapidly at the forefront on the global stage. And yeah, for us, we want to be part of the journey. You know, we can facilitate that journey. We've been in the industry for quite some time. Now we have already a big team here in Delhi and planning to aggressively expand. And again, the whole ecosystem, I feel, is it's very good as well. I think the government with, Make in India, Digital India, Startup India, there's been this kind of foundation in terms of a thriving tech ecosystem that will help to really kind of propel that growth, especially within the kind of smartphone industry. So yeah, we're quite excited and ramping up very rapidly in terms of our expansions plan here, both from an operation standpoint and manufacturing level.
Right. What kind of unusual trends have you observed when it comes to smartphone buying in India? You said that, this is your fastest growing market. You've recently taken charge of the India market in addition to your other responsibilities. What has surprised you? Are you seeing demand come in from smaller cities, from, different age groups? What usage patterns have surprised you?
So the average selling price is increasing year on year. So I guess this is mirroring the sort of growth of the local economy as well. And or for the longest period of time, all the sort of new OEMs entering India were purely focusing on, value for money. Here are the specs. Here is the whereas I feel now, and we've seen that shift, and I think that's where why also nothing has been growing. People are buying more and more into experiences and more into aspirational brands. And I think that's where it sort of was the perfect match for a brand like us, because ever since we started has been really focusing on the user experience. Everything we've done has been from a user standpoint, because we started this company because we didn't feel excited about what the market had to offer. So every single product we ship to the market are products we're really proud of and products we'll be using ourselves. And that approach really helped kind of growing quite aggressively in India, and then the whole kind of design aspects, careful attention to things that go beyond the pure functionality of the products. We saw also that there was a lot of interest as well. And yeah, it's been going good so far.
Will it be easy for you to break into the US market? Are people kind of bored of Apple there?
I think it's another beast. It's another beast. I think we have already a lot to do here in India, and again, we're quite excited in the way that we're seeing India being at the forefront on the global stage of the smartphone industry. And if you think about it, history, there's been a lot of smartphone brands that were born out of the tailwinds of the big economies. It was first Apple with the Silicon Valley. China 10 years ago, we saw like a lot of brands coming out of China, and we're definitely, again, quite bullish on the fact that India is next. So I think this is the place to be for the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to the smartphone.
Wow, India is the place to be for the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe you should relocate from London soon.
In the process, actually.
Great. Siddharth, voice is emerging as the new interface across smartphones, earbuds, smart home devices. People are very comfortable using audio messages for everything. So how do you see Levin Labs integrating into that? Are you exploring partnerships there? For instance, will we see Levin Labs and Nothing working together?
So, before 11 Labs, right, I had the opportunity to be a part of the digital video, social media, that whole industry, right? And there you sort of saw, with the advent of the mobile telephony revolution, you sort of saw what might have been decades compressed into 2-3 years, right? Right now, from our vantage point, if you sort of look at what is happening with AI and sort of professional enterprise consumer adoption, it is absolutely staggering. It is staggering. So if you think about it, the breadth of use cases, right? How it's cutting across industries, personas, it's just at a scale which is unbelievably exciting when you sort of think about that, right? And, India does have some very unique constructs which allow for this, right? So, for example, there may be 100-odd million podcast listeners today. You got video at 500, 600 million users. You have maybe 140, 150 million voice interactors with their devices, right? To the point that you spoke. The language, the linguistic, the dialect diversity, all of this is sort of the perfect recipe for this, right? Yesterday, Mr. Modi also talked about how we've got an unbelievably fertile content, podcast, creator ecosystem, and media ecosystem in the country, right? So I think that's the perfect set of environment for a technology like us to really sort of find its home, and that's what we sort of see, right? So if I think about this, let's say, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years down the line, what do I think will play out? India, which already is, will continue to probably be one of our highest user and usage markets, number one. Number two, we have moved from the phase of sort of people experimenting or just sort of coming in to figure out, wow, this is new, to folks now really doubling down on use cases or trying to figure out, hey, this is where my imagination is, can I scale the technology into that, right? I think a year from now, those things would have proved to be true, and you will start seeing population scale at that. That is two. And the third, the way we go to market will surely evolve in that sense, right? Today, we've got great online distribution. I think about 70% of our distribution today is by repeat visitors coming to our website and then accessing our technology, right? And we're in the process of setting up, other partnerships, other modes of taking our technology, partnering with big companies and going to market. So yeah, a lot of exciting things in the works in that sense.
Final 2 minutes. So, Akis, tell our audience how you use AI every day, and one tip, how can they use AI to kind of be more efficient, be more productive? Very quick, 1 minute each.
I think when it comes to smartphone, like the use case are still quite limited. Now we introduce basically our first kind of AI features where it acts as a second memory. Nowadays you kind of have content in your notes, in your emails, you take like pictures randomly and so on. So now we've created like a N-1 screen where basically you can brand up everything. And hopefully this will help you kind of trigger more and more kind of proactive actions. So this is a kind of the first step, but then gradually, I hope our role will be, because there is a lot of, like, for instance, the privacy concern. I think this is due to the fact that the user hasn't yet been educated or seeing clear use cases which benefit them. But I'm quite sure rapidly when people, to your point, will be spending, just a few minutes versus 10 minutes on the smartphone, because everything is a lot more kind of personalized, contextualized, and kind of raise action straight away so you don't have to look through your smartphone. I think people gradually will be less worried about the whole kind of privacy because they will see so much added value to the user experience. So I think it's going to be more for our work to hopefully bring those experiences in a very intuitive way and seamless, and hopefully get people to see the value. And this is what we're doing at Nothing at the moment, really anchoring in specific use cases and gradually ramping up all our AI products and features.
Right. Final 20 seconds, Siddharth. How do you use AI?
Well, our entire go-to-market machinery has AI embedded in it today. Today before sort of coming to this event, I used AI to sort of prep for this panel.
Okay.
And yeah, as an AI lab, I think the most important thing we do is put Studio Ghibli-like photos in the hands of people and voices.
Great. On that note, a huge round of applause for Akis and Siddharth. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the next sentence I say is going to give you a clue as to what we're talking about next. Bharat has stamped its flag in the universe, and how? Ladies and gentlemen, next we're going to be exploring the frontiers of space, and let's talk about India's ambitions in this arena. Right from ISRO's remarkable achievements to the potential for private players to drive different kinds of innovation, we're going to be delving into the exciting possibilities that lie ahead for us as a nation. Can ISRO be a competitor to Starlink? How can we encourage more innovation, more research and development in space technology to reduce our dependence on foreign players? What role can collaboration between ISRO, between private companies and startups play in driving growth and innovation in the space sector? How can we leverage our space program to drive socio-economic development, from remote sensing and navigation to telemedicine and maybe even education for the billions who are part of this country? We're going to be blasting off into space with this next fascinating discussion. Tighten on your seatbelts. We're going to invite onto the stage Dr. Jitendra Singh. He's the Union Minister of State, Independent Charge of Science and Technology, Earth Sciences. He's also the Minister of State for Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions for the Government of India. This next session is called Over the Moon, India's Space Drive. And he's going to be in conversation with Anand Narsiman. Let's have them on the stage. Let's give them a huge round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. You can be a little more generous with the applause. He has the ability to underplay to the level that we don't know the extent of responsibilities and role that he has in the establishment, in the government. But he is also someone who specifically made time for Rising Bharat Summit 2025. So, Dr. Jitendra Singh ji, namaste and bahut bahut dhanyawad.
Thank you, very kind of you. I'm sure this is going to be a learning experience for me as well, so thanks for making me a part of this.
सर एक पैसेज इसी से मैं शुरू करना चाहता हूँ. वक्त से जुड़ी डिबेट के मूल में तुष्टीकरण की राजनीति है. पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ अपीजमेंट है. ये तुष्टीकरण की राजनीति कोई नई नहीं है. इसका बीज हमारे स्वतंत्रता संग्राम के समय ही बो दिया गया था. आप सोचिए, भारत से पहले, भारत के साथ साथ और हमारे बाद दुनिया के कई देश आजाद हुए, लेकिन कितने देश ऐसे थे जिनकी आजादी की शर्त विभाजन थी. आजादी के साथ ही वो टूट गया. भारत के साथ ऐसा क्यों हुआ? क्योंकि उस समय राष्ट्रहित के ऊपर सत्ता का मोह रख दिया गया. ये प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी एट द राइजिंग भारत समिट लेस देन 24 आवर्स अगो.
Yeah, Anand, I think जो प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा है, nobody could have summed it up better than what he's done in a very polite, very subtle manner, which has, of course, very crude connotations. And since you raked up this, I'll ask you to give me 2 or 3 minutes because I have always had very strong views on this. And I have gone on record, in fact, I have written a number of times, also said once in the parliament, that the partition of the Indian subcontinent was possibly the greatest blunder in the recent history of the world. और एक बड़ा मूल प्रश्न ये है, nobody raises this, who asked for partition? There was no public demand, there was no yearning in any section of society. It was just the ambition of 2 individuals, Nehru and Jinnah, because you couldn't have 2 prime ministers in a single country, so they carved out one each for each one of them. And the British Empire made the best use of this ambition of theirs to divide. In fact, Mountbatten initially had another plan to divide it into 3 parts. Hindustan, Pakistan or Princesstan. Thankfully, thanks to Sardar Patel, he didn't let that happen. But जो बुनियादी सवाल जो कहीं नहीं बोला जाता वो ये है कि in fact, while the so-called political protagonists of Pakistan were demanding an Islamic state or Islamic nation on the basis of 2-nation theory, the common man, even in the Muslim community, was opposed to it. There was a forum of the Muslim intellectuals and Muslim writers called the Progressive Writers Forum, जिसमें साहिर भी थे, जिसमें कैफी भी थे, मोहसिन भोपाली भी थे. They had actually very vehemently opposed the idea of partition. So much so that, and in fact, even when this happened, they were so disgusted that they had no hesitation in writing about it. फैज़ अहमद फैज़ वहाँ चले गए तो वहीं थे लाहौर में. तो वहाँ से उन्होंने लिखा कि ये दाग दाग उजाला ये शब गुज़ीदा शहर वो इंतज़ार था जिसको ये वो शहर नहीं. When he saw the riots happening. And Sahir went to Pakistan actually, but he stayed there for about 2 years. I think somewhere towards the end of 1949, he came back, very disgusted. And he wrote immediately, "Ke रहबरे मुल्क बता, ये किसका लहू ये कौन मरा?" And then later on, a few years later, he went on to write another beautiful poem, which of course Raj Kapoor incorporated in one of his movies. जब दुख के बादल पिघलेंगे, जब सुख का सागर छलकेगा, जब अंबर झूम कर नाचेगा, जब धरती नगमे गाएगी, जिस सुबह की खातिर मर मर के हम युग युग से जीते हैं, जिस सुबह के अमृत की धुन में हम जहर के प्याले पीते हैं, इन भूखी प्यासी रूहों को एक दिन तो कर्म फरमाएगी. So what I'm trying to say is that in the immediate aftermath of partition saw bloodshed, displacement, the biggest ever exchange of populations happening anywhere in the world. And in the later aftermath, after a few years, it was food scarcity, poverty, a long spell, which even India had to bear. Under the same Prime Minister, who happened to be one of the protagonists of the party.